My name is Amy Constance. I'm originally from Melfort, and I'm a member of James Smith Cree Nation. I graduated high school here at MUCC, went on to go to U of R, did my human justice degree, worked for a bit out at James Smith with a little bit of education, and then decided to actually do justice work and went to Saskatoon Tribal Council and worked for the Justice Department, which is when I decided that I officially would like to go to law school. So wrote the LSAT, applied, and now I'm currently finishing my second year. But I also really was passionate about access to justice. Like, I didn't know that's what it was referred to at the time, but I liked the little guy and wanted to make sure everyone's rights are respected and there's someone speaking out for against injustice and things like that. The clientele in the criminal system and the child protection system is largely Indigenous people. There's an overrepresentation. So for me, it's just showing up as an Indigenous person and being like, I like to be a figure for them to see, and someone's like, oh, I can understand your worldview and some of the things you had growing up, because I experienced them in my own family, or for whatever reason, like I understand what it's like to be out in the reserve. Historically, the law has been used to oppress, discriminate, and assimilate, and like commit a genocide against Indigenous people in this country. It's been seen through legislation and statutes such as the Indian Act, which still is in effect today. Yeah, so it affected like what kind of jobs people would have, what schools they were able to attend, whether they could pass on their status if they married out of their, married out or not, which like even today, like my children and my grandchildren will be affected by the Indian Act because I am a 6'2" under the Indian Act, so like I can't pass my status on to a kid without having my partner be status as well. So it still continues to affect, and it's such a deep, like it's so deeply entrenched in the Indigenous experience in Canada today, how laws affect us are so negative. The Act is legislation that governed the lives of Indigenous people. It contained things such as the residential school system, the pass system with being able to go in and out of reserve, enfranchisement, which people, like if a status Indian wanted to become a lawyer, for example, they would have to give up their status if they wanted to become a lawyer. So, things have changed because, like, I am a status Indigenous person that I am now becoming a lawyer, and I still have to keep my status, which is, like, within, 75 years ago? Within a pretty current time, that wouldn't be able to happen. There's a lot of factors that could prevent me from, like, if someone's having the worst day of their life in the criminal system, there were a lot of factors that went into, like, myself not being there. Like, my promotion was a residential school survivor. So my father's a day school survivor. I'm an intergenerational survivor. And because my dad was not, my motion had made the choice to not send my dad and his siblings to residential school, they were able to be raised by their parents and have good child rearing practices. And my dad was able to raise me and my sibling. And so for that, I grew up with a stable home, food, like I always had good clothes, like everything like that. And that prevented me from falling down the wrong path, or there's a lot that would have had to go wrong for me to go down there. So I think of looking at someone else who maybe was in the child welfare system or grew up in poverty or just like anything like I previously mentioned, like they got to this point because like there's a lot of things that went wrong for them where they went right for me. I think largely would be remedying the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the criminal system, in the child welfare system, the overrepresentation as themselves being victims of murder or victims of crime, such as like missing and murdered Indigenous women and men and children and girls, everything like that. I think the remedying it is the most important, just because you look at the statistics and it's like 90% of the children on the docket in child protection courts this year were Indigenous versus like not even like 10% were non-Indigenous. And that's just so startling to see. And once again, the calls were laid out in the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. So implementing those and like hearing, listening, everything like that they can better accommodate Indigenous people. Generally, I consider the system to be inaccessible. If you don't have a vehicle, you don't have public transport or money for public transport, access to a vehicle, have someone give you a ride, you're not able to make it to court, and so then boom, you might have a bench warrant or something like that. And I think like everyone has a cell phone now for the most part, so if they are allowed to phone into the court or things like that, or do appear remotely, that would be one of the things that could be lessen as a barrier. Especially like for our people in the north, like it's hard to appear to court, and if you say you live in like Birch Narrows and court's in like Prince Albert, that's like a 5-7 hour drive, so that's impossible to go if you have no accommodation. And even implementing like Indigenous justice systems, so like people who are from the community, like especially if it's a crime that happens in the community or something that happens in the community, that community is able to deal with it without an outsider perspective, or like, someone rolling in who they might think as like, being higher than thou or more than like everything like that, just because they're, a non-Indigenous person coming into their community and like making these sentences or instituting these things, which when they don't know the reality of what the experience of the people in the community are. So I think the Indigenous justice system would be a good start. There's more and more Indigenous people that apply to law school, or I see like in the courtrooms, or you see on speaking for firms, or just speaking out, being in politics, leadership, whatever. And that makes me feel positive, knowing that there's more and more like figures to see and representation for people to aspire to. Because I think most people, like, I think most Indigenous people like me would have the experiences of, oh, I had a cousin who's been to jail, or oh, I've had family members that have had interactions with the police negatively, or been in the child welfare system. So I think it's just wonderful to see like there's other positive examples, and that can kind of shift the view of how Indigenous people view the law. I would say it's still scary. I think it'll always be scary to try something new or to go into a difficult program, but it's so worth it. And despite us being such a small number still, there are more and more every year, and we keep growing. And in Saskatchewan especially, the bar is so collegial. So if you're interested in learning from someone else, or meeting with someone for a coffee to learn, or just talk and get their experiences and get their views, they're very open and willing to help you. I think especially in the Indigenous bar as well is very much, because we want other Indigenous people to go into practice of law and to succeed.